Living Wage Christchurch. What's your name again? Oh, Chaz, come forward.
I feel like I'm coming home.
I know. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome home.
Thank you, Lady Mayor and councillors. My name is...
What did you just call me?
A Lady Mayor.
Madam.
I was going to say Leanne, but I didn't think that was appropriate.
No, I would much rather you said Leanne, Chaz.
Okay, Leanne.
He meant your worship.
But I'll do
your graciousness.
I'll do
the others.
I'll do Leanne because I'm more comfortable with that. You will have read our submission, so I won't go through the entire submission with you, but I'll draw your attention to some salient aspects. First of all, the living wage movement is non-political. It is comprised of faith-based groups, secular community groups and unions. 76 organisations across New Zealand. The living wage figure is independently assessed by the New Zealand Facility Centre of Social Policy Unit, so it is researched. It's not just drawn out of a hat. Now, we are aware that Christchurch City Council is one of the leaders in Christchurch, aware of poverty and the need to have social housing that helps to address this. Many organisations and individuals look to the council to help protect some of the most vulnerable members of our society through services that they provide, and this is commended. However, it is disappointing when some of those very people who work for firms that are contracted by the council and undertake services either for the City Council or Christchurch City Holdings are living in poverty. Good contractors know the current system of tenders based purely on lowest price has led to an unsustainable race to the bottom and has delivered increased poverty. Christchurch City Council and Christchurch City Holdings should look to create and implement responsible contracting practices as part of its procurement policy to encourage these good contractors and to ensure that the City Council continues to be a leader in fighting poverty within our region. The current rate of 19.80 per hour is moving to 2020 on the 1st of July. We know that a very large number of council employees currently earn above that rate, and that is a very good thing. However, there are still those who are not there by a long way. You will remember, councillors, one of the recent submissions that we delivered before you. We invited a cleaner in Christchurch City Airport working nights. She worked nights and lived in a very cold, damp house. Her and her 4 children lived in one room. That was the only room that they could afford to heat, and they had lines in that room to dry their wet washing. She told you that the only time that they could afford vegetables was on payday. The rest of the days until payday came again, it was fill-in food, and she said bread and rice, just to fill their tummies. This can't be a reality of workers in our city today. When we asked Molly what being paid the living wage would mean to her, she said it would mean that I could go to the shops like normal people. Molly was so poor, in her mind she was abnormal, and she is employed as a cleaner on nights in Christchurch City Airport. The Living Wage Steering Group does understand that the Council has ongoing financial issues, but we were very disappointed that the living wage was not even mentioned in the 2015 long-term plan shortly after that presentation. And we are very disappointed that it does not appear to be included within the 2017 plan. The Living Wage strongly believes that the City Council should be working towards becoming a living wage employer, much in the same way as Wellington is and Auckland City Councils are working towards becoming. This would mean a commitment for the inclusion of the living wage in the 2018 and to 2028 long-term plan. Work would need to be done prior to this, and we strongly urge the Christchurch City Council to undertake this as a priority. We have 4 recommendations, and I'll ask Jolien to explain them to you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be supporting the living wages submission because I work with a social service agency, and as we're all aware, child poverty has been intractable in New Zealand for quite a long time, regardless of who is in government. But we're seeing a new thing in recent years where 1/5 of those in poverty are in families where someone works. So that's our large concern in this area. We have the recommendations that Chaz said. I wonder at some point if it would be better for us to hear recommendations from the council, because I know you've passed resolutions around the living wage numerous times, and so I'm not sure where the blockages are, but it might be more helpful for the living wage to hear from you in coming days to find out where those blockages are. But at the moment we're asking that the Christchurch City Council undertake a report to identify just how many directly paid employees below the living wage rate, that the City Council obtain reports from those contractors that deliver services on a regular and ongoing basis to find out how many of their employees are paid below the living wage rate, that these reports be completed by December 2017 to enable that information to lead the discussion about the inclusion of the living wage in the 2018 to 28 long-term plan, and that inclusion would be in accordance with the accreditation program of the living wage movement. And that the Council creates and implements responsible contractor practices as part of their procurement strategy. So we're happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I think the reports are almost completed, so it won't be long that we'll be in a position to consider those.
Thank you.
They may have to be updated with the new rate, but work has been going on for quite some time. There are a number of issues that are raised, obviously, around direct employment and around contractors, especially where you can't influence what contractors pay their staff in other places. Although there is a mechanism for potentially resolving that as well, but that's through procurement policy. And of course, as you know, there are Auditor General guidelines that we have to follow. So obviously that will lead to a conversation with the Auditor General as well. So we're taking it very seriously, but there's a lot of work going on in the background. The one question that I asked the other day, and I'll ask again, is, and I'll ask it to the representatives from the union rather than from the social sector, you know, 10% of an elephant, 10% of a mouse. You know, if you're on a percentage wage increase, then obviously you get a hell of a lot more cash in your hand if you're on a high salary. So are the unions now looking at being a little bit more flexible around receiving more on a percentage basis for the people at the bottom and less on a percentage basis for the people at the top?
I can answer that because I wear 2 hats and I can speak from a union perspective as well. it's fair to say that the union is passionate about addressing, the unions are passionate about addressing poverty. We're looking at it several ways. I understand that in recent collective employment bargaining with the council, there were bigger percentage increases for those on lower rates than there were for those on higher rates. I personally am engaged in collective employment bargaining with big food sites, and I look at addressing that by giving a proposal of a dollar increase as opposed to a percentage increase. That does invite education and dialogue with working people beforehand so that they can understand the bigger picture about the need to take people out of poverty.
I think you picked up on the way that the management of the organisation has responded to our desire to get things done ahead of any formal decision. So the approach is one that I think has the ability to get to the result, but without being a cost on the ratepayers of Christchurch. Because I think the biggest fear that people have is that Christchurch City Council pays this higher rate of minimum wage, and the people who don't get a higher rate of minimum wage have to pay higher rates. If it can be done in a way that's kind of almost like a fiscal envelope, then you get the benefit of the lower being brought up, but you don't get the ratcheting, what do they call the escalation clause, relativities.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
We're totally aware of this. We've been engaging on living wage bargainings for many years now, and it's a common issue that's brought to us. How do we address that? So those are the ways that we're looking at doing it. You know, bigger increases for those at the bottom, either by a fixed dollar, which is easier to deliver to a ratification meeting, or get worker buy-in so that the people at the top say, actually, I don't need the money as much as they do. Yeah. So we go about it two ways.
Yeah. Andrew, and then I'm afraid we've...
Leanne has touched on a number of the things that I was going to question, but I do have one further question. And thanks for the presentation this afternoon. It's certainly clear that you've recognised some of the challenges that we have in terms of identifying who might be paid below the living wage, and not only within this organisation, but with our contractors and through CCHL and so on. So a reasonably complex set of relationships in terms of the council family, if you like. Presumably that means that you're open to what you might think of as a stepped approach as we go through that, some of which is around procurement policy, some of which obviously is around leading by example, and then perhaps expecting CCHL and the subsidiaries to follow once we've done that.
Absolutely, Andrew. That's very, very, very much the way that we're achieving the results that we are achieving. Sometimes to expect these things to happen overnight is non-realistic, but a commitment towards a journey too is very, very welcome, because some things can't be cracked straight away, but they can be achieved over a period of time.
Look, but thank you all very much for coming today. That's much appreciated. Thank you.